There are stories that take your breath away, but what Isabella experienced after her death is something that defies all logic. Not only did she cross to the other side, Jesus himself revealed a truth to her that few are prepared to hear. What she saw and what she was told will change the way you see life forever. Are you ready to discover it? My name is Isabella, and what I'm about to tell you is not a dream or an hallucination. It's something I lived, something that changed my life forever. I never imagined I would die, but that's exactly what happened. I crossed to the other side and saw things I never would have believed possible. And what I saw, what Jesus showed me, is something the world needs to know. That day started like any other. I woke up early, made my coffee, and followed my routine, just like always. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but there was something in the air, a strange feeling I couldn't put my finger on. At that moment, I didn't think much of it. I got in my car and took the usual route to work, not imagining it would be the last time I would drive that way. The traffic was heavy, and my mind was racing with 1,000 things: work stress, debts, daily worry. But then something happened that changed everything. A sudden pain in my chest, a feeling of emptiness, and then, out of nowhere, the impact. A loud crash, the sound of breaking glass screams in the distance, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, something was not right. I could see my own body inside the car, motionless. I saw people running toward me, saw paramedics trying to get me out of the vehicle, but I wasn't in my body. I was floating above the scene, observing everything with an indescribable clarity. I felt no fear, no pain, just a deep sense of peace. Something was calling me. It was an irresistible sensation. I wasn't walking or flying, but I was moving toward that light, as if being drawn by an invisible force. I had no control, but I didn't want to resist either. The light grew more intense, and with it, a feeling of absolute love that I had never felt on earth. It was as if everything I had ever sought was there, waiting for me. Suddenly, I found myself in a completely different place. It was an immense, beautiful space, filled with colors I had never seen before, a peace that cannot be described with words. The air was light, almost as if I were breathing light instead of oxygen, and then I saw him in front of me. It was Jesus. His presence was impossible to ignore. His face, his gaze, radiated pure love. But there was something more in his expression, something serious, something that made me feel I was about to receive an important message. He looked into my eyes and said, "It was not your time." His voice was not just a sound. It was something I felt deep within my being. Each word carried weight, a truth that was impossible to overlook. I wanted to respond, to ask him so many things, but before I could say anything, he raised a hand. Suddenly, I was witnessing something that took my breath away. I saw the earth, but not as we know it. It was as if I could see the reality behind the veil of the physical. I saw spiritual forces at work, invisible influences that most people ignore. I saw spiritual chains binding people without them knowing it. I saw lights in some places and shadows in others. And then Jesus showed me something that left me speechless. I saw souls arriving at this very place where I was, some with peaceful faces, others with expressions of terror and regret. I saw the weight of their lives reflected in their essence. I saw how their actions on earth determined what happened after death. I wanted to ask, I wanted to understand more, but Jesus just looked at me with that expression of love and authority that enveloped everything. And then he showed me something else, something that left me completely breathless. My heart was pounding, or at least I felt that it was. Although I no longer had a physical body at that moment, the presence of Jesus was so intense that I could barely comprehend what I was seeing. But then, with a single gesture of his hand, everything changed. The place where we were vanished. Suddenly, I found myself floating above what appeared to be Earth, but it wasn't Earth as we know it. I saw cities, towns, and people, but what truly struck me was what lay behind it all. I saw threads of light connecting certain people, a special glow surrounding some, but I also saw dense shadows covering many others. And then I saw something I will never forget. Before me, Jesus showed me a vision of Africa, not the Africa we see in the news or in history books, but a different Africa, glorious. I saw magnificent cities, ancient civilizations, with a spiritual wisdom that seemed to transcend everything I had known. I saw dark-skinned people walking with a presence, an authority, a connection to the divine that was almost palpable. Their energy was different, as if they were tuned in to something greater, something that the world had forgotten. I looked at Jesus, trying to understand what I was seeing. And then he spoke. The truth has been hidden from them. His voice resonated within me like an echo in my soul. They were chosen for something great, but the world has deceived them. It has made them forget who they truly are. I saw people being torn from their land, separated from their families, forced to forget their roots, their language, their history, their connection to God. Not just for what they were experiencing physically, but for what they were losing spiritually. I saw how they were told, generation after generation, that they were nothing, that they were worth less than nothing. And the most shocking, I saw the spiritual influence behind it all. It was not just history. It was a carefully executed plan to erase their identity. Jesus looked at me, and with sadness in his voice, he said, the enemy feared their power, feared what they could do if they remembered who they really were. But then the vision changed again. I saw many without hope, believing they were destined to suffer, that there was no greater purpose for them. And then I saw some who were awakening, people who in some way were beginning to remember, to question, to seek something deeper. I saw how a spark ignited within them, and that spark began to light up others. Jesus smiled slightly and said, "The time of awakening has begun." My soul trembled at those words. I wanted to ask more, but before I could, the vision changed once again. What I saw next took my breath away. My body trembled. What I was witnessing was not just history. It was a truth that had been hidden for generations. I felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all, but Jesus remained by my side with that look of love and compassion that made me feel safe despite everything I was seeing. The vision deepened even further. I saw the modern world, but not as I had seen it before. I saw the invisible structures that controlled people's minds. I saw how through education, the media, and institutions, the lie had been carefully sown, generation after generation, so that no one would question anything. Everything was designed so that this truth would never come to light. I saw fear in the hearts of many, an imposed fear, a fear that made them doubt their own worth, their own identity. And then, Jesus showed me something even more shocking. I saw how the enemy had infiltrated everything, not just in history, but in spirituality itself. Religious structures had been created to distort the truth, to make people believe that the connection with God was external, when it had always been within. I saw how many sought answers in the wrong places. Religion had become a tool of manipulation to keep people blind, to keep them enslaved to a system that would never allow them to remember who they truly were. Jesus looked at me and said firmly, "The greatest lie was not physical oppression, but spiritual oppression. Because if a soul does not know who it is, it will never claim its inheritance." I felt a shiver run through me. This was not just about the past, but about the present and the future. I saw how many people were beginning to question, to awaken, but the enemy was counterattacking with greater force. I saw how the world was filled with distractions, chaos, and constant noise to prevent souls from finding the necessary silence to hear the voice of God within them. I saw how materialism, individualism, and selfishness were promoted, all to prevent people from truly coming together and understanding the power they held when aligned with their divine purpose. The battle has always been spiritual, Jesus said, and now it is reaching its most critical point. Suddenly, I saw a great darkness covering the world. It was like a thick veil, a shadow spreading over entire nations. But within that shadow, there were small lights shining, lights that lit up one by one, forming a network of light that began to break the darkness. I saw people awakening, remembering, finding their purpose. I saw communities coming together. I saw families healing. I saw spiritual chains breaking. And then I understood. It wasn't just about knowing the truth, but about living it, sharing it, helping others see it. The awakening will not be easy. The enemy will do everything possible to prevent it. He will use fear, confusion, and doubt. But those who listen, those who remember, will have the responsibility to guide others. At that moment, I felt a weight on my shoulders, not a burden, but a responsibility. I knew that what I had seen was not for me to keep, but for me to share. Suddenly, the vision changed again. I saw what was to come. I saw events that would shake the world. I saw difficult trials, times of confusion, but I also saw a great transformation. I saw people reclaiming their power, communities flourishing, the truth shining like never before. And just when I was trying to assimilate all this, I felt something pull me back. It was as if I were being returned to my body. I tried to resist. I tried to stay a little longer to better understand what I was seeing. But the voice of Jesus resonated one last time. It is time to return. Now your mission begins. And in an instant, I opened my eyes. I jolted awake, gasping, feeling my body as if it weighed tons. I was back in reality, but nothing felt real. Everything I had seen, everything I had heard, was burned into my soul like fire in my insides. My ears were ringing, my vision was slow to adjust, and my chest was rising and falling rapidly. I had returned, but I was no longer the same person who had left. The hospital monitors were beeping wildly. Nurses rushed in, their faces filled with astonishment and fear. I knew what had happened was a miracle. I saw a doctor frozen in the doorway, his eyes wide as saucers, holding a file that seemed ready to slip from his hands. I felt the weight of everyone's gaze on me, but my mind was still somewhere else. My family was there, crying, touching me, as if they couldn't believe I was really alive. My mother took my hand. Her fingers trembled. "Isabella, oh my God, can you hear me?" I looked at her but couldn't respond right away. My mouth was dry, my throat burned, and my mind was still in that other dimension. Slowly, the voices around me began to sharpen. The doctor, who seemed to be the head of emergency, finally spoke with disbelief on his face. "This is impossible." I wanted to talk, to tell what I had seen, what Jesus had revealed to me, but I couldn't. How could I put it into words? How could I explain something so immense when I could barely grasp it myself? The following days were strange. I felt a connection to something greater, as if the veil between this world and the next hadn't completely closed. But along with this clarity came a burden, a weight I couldn't ignore. But how to do so without being thought crazy? Who would believe me? I found myself sitting on the hospital bed, looking out the window, feeling the world move around me as if I didn't quite belong to it. My thoughts ebbed and flowed endlessly. And then, like a whisper deep within my soul, I heard Jesus' voice once more. "Speak." My skin prickled. I looked around, but I was alone. The voice didn't come from outside. It came from within. I closed my eyes and felt the same warmth I had sensed in his presence. "Speak. The truth must be revealed." My heart raced. I knew what I had to do. The first time I tried to talk about what I had seen, the reaction was not what I had expected. My family was too busy celebrating my return to pay attention to what I was trying to explain. I didn't blame them. Their joy was understandable. But when I finally gathered my closest friends and family to share my testimony, things became much more difficult than I had imagined. I explained in detail every part of my experience. The sensation of leaving my body, the journey through the tunnel of light, the revelation from Jesus about the true history of humanity, and how everything had been manipulated to keep us blind. I talked about ancient civilizations, the spiritual power that had been erased from history, the deceit that kept us asleep. But as soon as I finished, what I received was not understanding, but empty stares, discomfort, and skepticism. My sister was the first to speak. "Yeah, that sounds," She hesitated, looking for the right way to say it, without offending me too much. Too much? I asked incredulously. Too much for whom? For you. Because for me, it was real, more real than anything I've experienced here. Murmurs began among those present. Some tried to calm me down, while others simply avoided my gaze. What you saw could have been a hallucination, one of my uncles said. You know, the brain does strange things when someone is, well, you know. My blood boiled. Do they really think this was a hallucination? I saw Jesus? How can they deny something so powerful just because it doesn't fit their idea of reality? But no one responded. No one wanted to discuss it. No one wanted to accept it. It was at that moment that I understood something. People don't reject the truth because it's unbelievable. They reject it because it forces them to question everything they've believed until now. And that is scary. The next few days were lonely. My friends and family began to treat me differently, as if I were disturbed. They gave me short answers, avoided my calls. Some even left my messages unread without responding. It hurt. Hurt more than I expected. But deep down I understood. Jesus had warned me that this message wouldn't be easy to accept. There would be those who listen and those who shut their ears, but you must carry on. I knew I couldn't remain silent, so I took my phone and began to write my story. I decided to share my testimony online, no matter the consequences. I didn't know what would happen if anyone would listen to me, or if I would just be ignored, like my family had done. Doing what I was asked, I pressed publish, and within hours my life changed forever. I didn't know what to expect when I shared my testimony. A part of me thought it would go unnoticed, buried among thousands of stories on the internet. Another part feared it would be rejected, that people would mock me, as my friends and family had done. But what happened was something I never imagined. Within hours, my story went viral. Thousands of people began to comment, share, and react. I received messages from people all over the world saying my words resonated with something inside them. They felt there was truth in what I was saying, but not everyone agreed. The criticism came quickly. Some said I was crazy, that it had all been a hallucination caused by lack of oxygen in my brain. Others claimed I was making it all up for attention. But what surprised me the most was how many people seemed upset by my experience. Not because they didn't believe me, but because it made them question too much. Some said that this kind of revelation was dangerous, that I could be deceived by dark forces. Others insisted that Jesus would never appear to talk about these things, that the truth was already written and there was nothing more to learn. But there were also those who knew exactly what I was talking about. I received private messages from people who had seen the same thing, who had also died and had similar vision. They spoke of the manipulation of history, spiritual oppression, of the deception the world was trapped. There were pastors, researchers, even people who had never believed in God until they had their own near-death experience. They all said the same thing. There was something hidden that needed to be revealed. But then, something strange began to happen. The next day, my post disappeared. It was nothing I had done or any moderator. It simply stopped existing. It wasn't in my profile or in my drafts. There was no deletion, notification, or warnings, as if it had never been published. I tried rewriting it. I uploaded a video explaining what had happened, but soon after, that disappeared too. My account was temporarily blocked, with no explanation. Something was wrong. I started receiving emails from strangers. Some contained warning attempts. Stop talking about this. You have no idea what you're touching. Others were more sinister, with veiled threats, or messages with no sender. But the worst part was when my phone began receiving calls from non-existent numbers. When I answered, all I heard was deep breathing. No one spoke. No one hung up. Just silence. One night, while searching my computer to recover something from my testimony, all the lights in my house flickered at the same time. My screen went dark, and when it turned back on, there was a single message on it. Stop. I was frozen. This wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. The physical world wasn't the only one reacting to my testimony. Something else was, too. Something that didn't want people to know. The truth. But what was really bothering these forces? I thought about what Jesus had shown me in the revelation about humanity's true story, about spiritual oppression, about the power that had been taken away. And then I understood. The enemy doesn't fear people knowing the story. It fears people remembering who they are, truly. That night, I knelt by my bed and prayed with all the strength of my heart. Lord, tell me what to do. Tell me how to proceed. I felt a deep peace envelop me, and within me, I heard his voice. Do not fear. Keep going. Jesus hadn't shown me all this just to scare me and stop me. He showed me to speak. The next day I tried again. I created new accounts, used different platforms, sent personal emails with my story. I shared it on forums, in private groups, anywhere it could be seen. And this time, something incredible happened. People not only read it, but began sharing their own experiences. Others who had died in return started to speak. Some had seen the same thing I had. Others had seen different aspects of the same truth. And together, everything started to fall into place. The story that had been told to us about who we are, where we come from, and what our purpose is had been manipulated for centuries. They had made us forget, kept us busy, distracted, and fearful of looking beyond what we were taught. But now, the comments were filled with questions, doubts, and personal revelations. It was as if a spark had ignited, and a fire was beginning that no one could extinguish. But it wasn't just the people who reacted. A few days later, I received an anonymous email. It had no sender, but the message was clear. Stop talking. That same night, I heard footsteps outside my house. Heavy, slow footsteps. I looked out the window, but there was no one there. I checked the security cameras, and in the footage, all I could see was the silhouette of a long shadow moving in a way that didn't seem human. My skin crawled. I knew what I was looking at. It wasn't just a physical threat, it was spiritual. Jesus had chosen me to see this for a reason, and if the enemy was reacting this way, it was because he knew the truth was coming to light. I refused. The question now was not whether I should keep talking. The question was how far I was willing to go for the world to know the truth. That feeling of being marked, of being chosen to share such a big message, wouldn't let me be at peace. The truth that had been revealed to me was not just knowledge, but a responsibility. Each passing day that I didn't speak about it, I felt a pressure in my chest, an inner voice telling me, you have to speak, you have to tell the truth. But fear was there too, strong and present. How could I face the rejection, the disbelief, the danger that could come from telling something so shocking? My first attempt to share my experience was with my family. I sat down with them in the living room, my hands trembling, and told them everything I had lived on the other side. Their faces went from surprise to confusion, and then to doubt. My mother, with tears in her eyes, tried to comfort me. Isabella, my love, you nearly died. Perhaps all of this was just a hallucination. My sister looked at me sadly. You must have dreamed all of that while you were unconscious. My father, the quietest of them all, simply got up and left the room without saying a word. But I knew it wasn't a dream. I had felt it. I had seen it. I had been there. So I tried to share my story with more people. I reached out to some friends, some spiritual leaders. I even tried to talk to someone from the church. But what I found wasn't acceptance, but resistance. This sounds like something out of a movie, a pastor told me. Maybe you should pray more and make sure this really comes from God. Another person simply ignored me. Some thought I was crazy. Others believed I had imagined it. But deep down in my soul, I knew it was real. When I decided to share my testimony online, things began to change. I posted a video detailing my experience, explaining what Jesus had shown me, the message about souls, about the hidden truth that had been manipulated for centuries. I didn't expect much, but within hours, the video started to receive hundreds of comments. Some people thanked me for sharing it. I always felt there was something more, something that they weren't telling us. One person wrote, another commented, "Your story made me cry. I feel like God is calling me to something bigger," but not everything was supportive. There were also messages filled with hate, accusations, mockery. Some even said I was making it all up for attention. At first, those comments hurt me. They made me doubt. I questioned whether I should keep speaking out, if it was worth facing so much rejection. But each time I closed my eyes, I saw the gaze of Jesus. His voice echoed in my mind. Speak, don't be afraid. It was then I realized that fear was part of the test. The enemy didn't want the truth to come to light, and if I was facing so much resistance, it was because my message held power. Little by little, my story began to reach more and more people. Some shepherds reached out to me privately, telling me they felt my testimony was genuine, but they couldn't speak about it publicly for fear of being rejected. I realized that many people felt the same way, but fear kept them silent. And that's when I understood that my mission wasn't to convince everyone, but rather to speak for those who were ready to listen. But just when I thought I was finding my purpose, things started to get strange. My phone began to malfunction. Videos I uploaded would disappear without explanation. My computer would shut down by itself while I was writing about my experience. At first, I thought they were coincidences, but then I started receiving calls from unknown numbers at all hours of the day and night. When I answered, there was no one on the other end, just heavy breathing, as if someone was listening. One night, while I was working on a new video, my screen flickered and suddenly went black. When I tried to turn it on again, a message appeared in my email. Stop talking. You don't know what you're playing with. My heart raced. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't normal. It wasn't just hate on the internet. It was something more, something that was trying to stop me. I looked around my room, feeling watched. Something in the atmosphere had changed. It was as if a dark presence had seeped into my home. And then I saw it, a reflection on my computer screen, something in the corner of my room. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this was bigger than I thought. But instead of feeling scared, something inside me ignited. I remembered the words of Jesus. I recalled what he had shown me. The enemy doesn't attack those who don't pose a threat. If something was trying to silence me, it was because the truth I carried was too powerful. And so I decided I wouldn't be silenced. The next day, I prepared a new video, more direct, more courageous. If they wanted to stop me, they would have to do more than send me warning messages. I had seen the truth, and the truth had to be told. The determination to move forward with my testimony filled me with courage, but it also made me aware that I was stepping into a battle larger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just a fight against disbelief or rejection, it was a spiritual war. And when you carry a message that threatens the darkness, the video I posted that night was different from the previous ones. I told people what was happening, the strange messages, the deleted videos, the feeling of being watched. I wasn't doing it to scare anyone, but to make it clear that what I had seen was real. If it weren't, why were so many trying to silence me? The response to the video was overwhelming. Thousands of people watched it in the first few hours. Supportive comments began flooding my social media. You're not alone. I felt that something has been hidden from us too. Keep going, we're with you. But there were also different, more disturbing messages. Stop talking. You're stepping into dangerous territory. You don't know who is listening. Some messages had no sender. Others were just chains of meaningless numbers. And then there was a call that changed everything. It was past midnight when my phone rang. The number was unknown. I hesitated to answer, but a force inside me. When I put the phone to my ear at first, I only heard silence. Then a deep, distorted voice spoke. Stop right there, don't go any further. My heart raced. It wasn't a typical threat. There was something in that voice that sent chills down my spine, a mix of hatred and something else, fear. I hung up. Immediately, I found myself staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. But before I could catch my breath, my lamp began to flicker. My computer, which had been off, turned on by itself and displayed a black screen with just one phrase written, "Silence is security." I looked around the room, feeling watched. Something wasn't right. Something was here. I felt a shiver running up my spine. It was the same feeling I had experienced the night I saw that shadow in my room. Only this time, it was stronger, more intense. I closed my eyes and murmured, "Protem." As soon as I spoke his name, the air in the room changed. The pressure in my chest vanished. The fear, while still present, lost its grip on me. I knew this wasn't just a warning. It was a test, a final chance they had to scare me before I made my ultimate decision. I would either keep talking or surrender to fear. The answer was obvious. I wouldn't be silenced. The next morning, I decided to do something radical. If the darkness wanted to silence me, I would speak louder. I reached out to an independent platform and requested to do a live broadcast, unfiltered, uncensored. I would tell my story, the whole story, without fear of repercussions. People needed to know. The world had to hear the truth. When the time for the live stream arrived, my heart raced, but not from fear, rather from determination. Thousands of people tuned in within minutes. The audience kept growing as I spoke. I told everything, from my accident to the encounter with Jesus, the visions, the truth about souls, the oppression that had existed for generations, and how the powers of this world had manipulated history to hide the light. And then, something unexpected happened. While I was speaking, the signal started to fail. The screen flickered, the image froze. But something incredible happened in the chat. People began saying they felt something powerful. Some were crying. Others said their bodies were experiencing chills, as if a divine presence was with them. It was as if Jesus himself was confirming my testimony in real time. The broadcast was cut off before I could finish. The platform sent me a message saying the video had been removed for unknown reasons. But it didn't matter anymore. The message had gotten through, and people weren't staying silent. Hundreds of people started sharing what they had heard, telling their own experiences, waking up. I knew I had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. The war had begun, but I wasn't afraid, because now I wasn't alone. The environment around me began to change again, and I felt that I was about to witness something even deeper. Jesus looked at me with an intensity I had never felt before, as if what he was about to show me was of the utmost importance. He extended his hand, and suddenly, the space around us transformed into something completely different. Before me appeared a vision, as if I were watching the history of the world unfold before my eyes. I saw ancient lands, civilizations that seemed more advanced than what history has told us. I saw great cities filled with knowledge, people with immense wisdom, a connection to the divine that was stronger than I had ever. I looked at Jesus in awe. I didn't understand what I was seeing. History has been altered, he said firmly. Truths were hidden, and lies have been taught for generations. Those whom the world has tried to oppress are more important than they have been made to believe. My heart was racing. I knew exactly who he was talking about. Before my eyes, the visions kept changing, showing how these people, who once were spiritual leaders and guardians of divine knowledge, were ripped from their lands, chained, reduced to slavery, and stripped of their identity. I saw ships full of people being taken far from their homes. I saw their tears, their pain, their suffering. But I also saw something else. Despite all they had faced, their spirit had never been broken. The true battle was never just physical. It was spiritual. There was a deep fear in those who wanted to keep them subdued, because they knew who they truly were. They knew that within them was something powerful, something that, if awakened, would change the world. The visions continued to unfold before me. I saw entire generations being forced to forget their true purpose. I saw how they were taught lies about themselves, how society conditioned them to believe they were not important, that they had no value. But then I saw something different. I saw people awakening. I saw hearts igniting with a new understanding of who they truly were. I saw how the veil of lies began to tear and how a greater truth started to come to light. The time of revelation has come. Jesus said, "Many will begin to remember, to claim what belongs to them. Those who have been oppressed will see that they were never alone, that I have always been with them, waiting for the moment when their hearts are ready to receive the truth." My eyes filled with tears. It was not just history. It was not just the past. This was happening right now. I could feel it. Jesus looked at me with tenderness, but also with seriousness. You must tell what you have seen, for this truth cannot remain hidden. I wanted to say something, but before I could respond, the environment around me began to fade. The light, the visions, everything started to dissipate like mist carried by the wind. I felt a force pulling me back, as if I were being taken back to my body. I tried to resist. I wanted to stay there, to keep learning, to keep seeing, but it was futile. A second later, I opened my eyes wide. The sound of the monitors, the voices of the doctors. I found myself back in the hospital bed, with tears running down my face. But I could barely process it. My mind was still in that other place. I knew what I had seen. I knew what Jesus had shown me. And most importantly, I knew I could not remain silent. From that day on, my life changed completely. I could not go on living as I had before, not after receiving such a great revelation. I knew that speaking about this would bring rejection, doubts, even anger from some people. But I also knew there were those who were ready to listen. That there were those who deep in their being knew something in the story didn't add up. That the world was built on lies and that the truth was starting to come to light. Since then, I have shared my experience with anyone willing to listen. Some call me crazy, others say it was all a product of my imagination. But there are also those who have felt something in their hearts upon hearing my story, who know that what I say resonates within their own souls. Jesus made it clear to me, the truth cannot remain hidden. We are entering a time of revelation, and those who have been marginalized for so long are about to discover who they truly are. My mission is not to convince anyone. My mission is to tell what I saw. And if my story has reached you, it may not be by chance. Perhaps it's because you are also ready to awaken. If this story impacted you, imagine what else is yet to be discovered. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any incredible testimonies like this one. Like and comment on what you think about this shocking revelation. Don't leave just yet. Click on the video on screen and keep uncovering the hidden truths that no one dares to tell.